Hey friends, this is Snap here today with my top 10 favorite commander cards from Duskmourn. Thanks for tuning in. I have a few cards that stood out to me from this new set that I want to talk a little bit about. A few of them are more popular cards, and some of them are maybe lesser known cards that I wanted to be able to give some shine to as well. Before we get into it, you may notice that I have changed my surroundings up here a little bit, and this is just testing it out. We'll see how it all goes. Hopefully there isn't too much distracting ambient noise, but I don't know. For right now, the wind chimes sound nice, and yeah, hopefully you can just get cozy. I've got some tea here with me. I recommend maybe you pour yourself some as well, and let's get into it. Um, so, the first card on my list of top 10 commander cards from Duskmourn is Altok, the Thrice Called. This is a 7 mana, 5 generic, and 2 green for a 9/9 trampling legendary insect beast. Whenever Altok, the Thrice Called, becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. But ignore all of that. I don't even want you to pay attention to that for the time being. Let's just look at the rest of this text. 2 mana, discard Altok, the Thrice Called, and then return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So yes, this is a huge 7 mana 9/9 guy that can beat face and has a kind of like pseudo ward ability, but even just completely ignoring that, the reason why I really like this card is because it is 2 mana to just discard this from your hand and return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if you think about it, if you are playing a deck that has a way to reliably put land cards into your graveyard, let's say you're running fetch lands, that's really all you have to do. Is if you're running a decent amount of fetch lands in your deck, then realistically this is a instant speed rampant growth. 2 mana, instant speed, discard it, ramp a land. And not only that, but while you're doing that, you're also dropping this gigantic bomb of a beater into your graveyard. So if you have any kind of reanimation stuff going on, that's going to be relevant later on in your deck as well. And another cool thing about this is one of the downsides for ramp spells is you hate to draw your rampant growth on turn 6, right? I mean, rampant growth looks pretty good on turn 2, but the later on that you get into the game, the less excited you are to top deck that. So this card is great because, again, if you have a way to reliably put lands into your graveyard, instant speed rampant growth in the early game or in the late game if you still want to ramp. But also, if you just rip this off of the top of your library on turn 6 or 7, you can just cast this, and it is it's not going to end the game or anything, but it is a big guy that is going to need to be contended or need to be dealt with essentially by your opponents. And even if they do deal with it, you're going to draw a card, so it replaces itself in that way too. So just a really cool card. The first time that I looked at this, I think I was more just disappointed that I couldn't play it as a commander. I mean, you can, but it doesn't really work very well in the command zone because you need to discard it. But the more that I look at it, the more I'm just like, dang, that is a rampant growth that you can play at instant speed that also puts a huge reanimation target in your graveyard, or in the late game is a big body. Another note about this card is it kind of has another card pairing with it from this set that doesn't really work in Commander, but I'll just cover it really quickly here. There's a card in Duskmourn called Say Its Name, which is just so flavorful. It's kind of got like the whole Bloody Mary vibe to it, where essentially it is a sorcery. You mill 3 cards, and then you may return a creature or land from your graveyard to your hand. So there's a bunch of cards that do this. Nothing super unique there. In fact, I think it's a little below rate in that sense, because a lot of times cards like this would mill 4 in general. But the really cool thing about this card, and again, this isn't really going to work in Commander all that much, but I just want to touch on it. It's a sick brew around in Standard, and you bet your butt I'm going to be playing with this combination of cards on Arena and seeing what I can do with it. But yeah, this also says you can exile this card and 2 other cards named say its name from your graveyard to search your graveyard, hand, and library for a card named Altok the Thrice Called and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle, and then activate only as a sorcery. But the really cool thing about this is these are 2 different abilities, so you don't even have to resolve any of them. If you can just put 3 of these into your graveyard, it's an activated ability for this second part. So as long as you have 3 of them in your graveyard, you can just exile these and get Altok onto the field as a 9/9 trampler. Again, not really relevant in Commander, so we're just going to kind of keep moving here, but it's flavorful. It is something that I definitely want to play around with in Standard, and another reason why Altok is just a really neat card. So yeah, think about if your deck is running fetch lands, if you're doing graveyard stuff, self-mill, any kind of discard, any reliable ways to put lands into your graveyard, and if you're doing that, then I think this is a great replacement for Rampant Growth in your deck. All right, let's move on. We did a lot of yapping on that one, so we'll go to number 2 on my list. These are in no particular order. I guess this could also technically be number 9 if we're counting backwards. It's kind of irrelevant, but yeah, I have 10 cards. This is the next one. Dollmaker Shop. This is one that a lot of people have been talking about, and so you've probably already heard a lot about it if you're tapped into any kind of like MTG content online, but I'm just going to add my voice to the choir and say this card is awesome. It is a room, a new type of card if you haven't seen these yet. It's essentially 2 enchantments stapled onto 1 enchantment, and the way you play it is you can cast either side, and then it comes down onto the field, and whatever side you paid for takes effect, and then you can also, while it's on the field, pay the mana to open the other side and activate the effect of the other side. So the first side of this room is you can pay 2 mana, a generic and a white, and it's an enchantment that says whenever 1 or more non-toy creatures you control attack a player, make a 1/1 toy artifact creature token. So early game, this can come down and as basically starts amassing an army for you. Whenever you attack, you make a guy is going to add up and create a lot of guys for you over the course of the game. The idea is that this comes down early on so you can start building your army. And then the second side of it is a 6 mana room that says creatures you control have base power and toughness equal to the number of creatures that you control. So if you are going wide with tokens, I mean, this helps you to go wide with tokens just in and of itself, which is one reason why it's such an awesome card. But yeah, if you're in a deck that's making lots of little 1/1s, it's going to make that first side better because you're going to be attacking with those 1/1s and making more 1/1s. But also that second side, the Porcelain Gallery, is just going to be a game ender in a lot of scenarios. And if not a game ender, you're at least going to kill one person with it, because that is really similar to a kind of Crater Hoof style ability where it's just going to come down. Let's say you have 7 1/1 tokens. That's not an unrealistic place to get to. That I would say that's even conservative depending on how wide you're going with your deck. But even if you just have 7 1/1s, all of a sudden all of those 1/1s are 7 7s. That is a ton of damage. That's enough to kill at least one player. So yeah, this card is awesome, and I would be lying if I did not also say that I'm a little biased in including this one on my list, but whatever, it's my list. But yeah, I'm including it also because this is a super cool fit for my Slime Against Humanity deck with the Necrobloom as the commander. I did a deck tech for that earlier on in this channel, so I'll put a link to it probably over here somewhere. Check that out. But yeah, this is a great card for it because the Necrobloom is already making tokens, so those tokens are going to make more tokens with the Dollmaker's Shop. By the time the second side comes down, it's just going to do so much damage or pump everybody so large that it's going to be able to do a lot of damage. And the really cool thing is that Slime Against Humanity tokens are 0/0s with 1/1 counters on them. So this makes their base power toughness however big they're going to be, plus all the +1/+1 counters. So this is going to be a sweet sort of overrun surprise gotcha effect for that deck as well, while also being a value piece in the early game. Sweet card. But let's move on to the next card on the list. Gonna take a sip here. Vengeful Possession. This card is also really cool and one that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but it is a sorcery, 2 generic and a red, 3 total. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn, and then you can discard a card, and if you do, draw a card. So first part of this ability you've seen a million times, but I will say this kind of, I forget what the original card that it's based off of. The one that comes to mind is Act of Treason, but essentially this kind of ability where you temporarily steal somebody else's creature, you get it for a turn, and then provided that you don't have a sacrifice outlet, it goes back to the opponent at the end of turn. I think that's already a kind of underrated kind of effect in Commander. A lot of times there's going to be really good targets for this, where you can just take somebody's big thing, attack them with it, attack somebody else with it. But obviously, if you are playing a deck that has a lot of ways to sacrifice creatures, then these are really good, because you get it for a turn, and then it also ends up being a removal spell at the end of the turn. Before you give it back, you can sacrifice the creature. But yeah, the reason why I'm mentioning this one specifically is that last bit about also when you play this, you can discard a card and draw a card is just really, really good bonus text on this card. Like I said, the ability itself is already kind of good in Commander, I think, if you're playing the right deck with sacrifice outlets. But then also just being able to discard a card and draw a new card on top of it, I think pushes this over the edge into being fairly playable in Commander. Again, it kind of depends on what kind of deck you're doing. But yeah, it's great if you want to be putting stuff into your graveyard for a million different reasons, whatever those reasons might be. And then also getting to draw a new card. It's just sort of letting you filter. You're not getting any card advantage, but it's letting you filter to find better cards for whatever the given scenario in the game state is. So yeah, I think that's just a great piece of extra text on this ability, and the ability itself is already kind of underplayed in Commander. So one to consider if you're doing sacrifice stuff, if you're doing graveyard stuff. Yeah, sweet card. Haven't heard it talked about a lot, so that is this entry. We're gonna keep pushing here, and I think this next bit of the list is my my edgy side sort of pushing through. I think we've got 3 black cards in a row. This set in general is just like pretty sweet in my opinion, because I love all of the just sort of like horror themes. I think that the survivors are a little corny, so I actually haven't even really included, just like with the 80s gear, I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way a little bit in Commander, but all the monsters in the set look really cool. So we're going to sort of get into a streak of cards along that line, starting with Psych. We're gonna go back to this one because I just set you guys up to do all the edgy cards, so we'll come back to Volgavoth's Onslaught. Cool card, but we'll go over to Demonic Council. You've probably seen this one. Lots of people are talking about it. This is essentially a demonic tutor if you have Delirium, meaning if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, you can search your library for any card and put it into your hand for 2 mana. That's Demonic Tutor. It's one of the strongest cards in the entire format. Granted, you do have to have Delirium in order for this to work, but that's not that hard to do in a game of Commander, especially, again, if you're in the right deck that's focused on putting stuff into your graveyard. But one of the other reasons why I want to mention this one in this video is actually so I can have an excuse to talk about another card that's not in the set, but that I've just been wanting to talk about for a long time. And I think that this is sort of a good place to just bookmark that in. The first part of this card says you can just search your library for, this is if you don't have Delirium, you can search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. That's not always going to be great, but there is one demon that came out in a recent set that I think is seeing a catastrophically low amount of play, considering how good I think this card actually is. And so I mentioned Demonic Council because at the very least, even if you don't have Delirium, you can pay 2 mana to go get your Crabomination. So surprise, here's a Modern Horizons 3 card in this video, but we're just going to talk about this for a second. I considered making its own video for it, but we're just going to sort of put it in here. This card is awesome. Do you like Atali? This is a mini Atali that is way easier to cast and can potentially be cast for like very, very little mana. So this is a 6 mana crab demon. It has Emerge from Artifact, which means you can pay 5 generic and 2 black, and then sacrifice an artifact and reduce that emerge cost by the converted mana cost of the sacrificed artifact. So for example, if you have a 2 mana rock, you can tap that mana rock for a black mana to pay for this emerge cost, and then sacrifice it to reduce this emerge cost by 2 more, thus making it cost 5 mana, and you already used 1 mana off of the mana rock to cast it. So this can be cast really early on. If you play a mana rock on turn 2, then on turn 3 you play a land, you have 4 mana, and then on turn 4 you could pay 5 total, sacrifice the mana rock, and cast this card. So what does it do? It is a 5/5, and it says when it enters, target opponent exiles the top card of their library, a card at random from their graveyard, and a card at random from their hand. You can cast this spell, you can cast a spell from among the cards exiled this way without paying its mana cost. So this is so cool in so many different ways because it's doing a lot of card advantage for you. It's kind of subtle, but really what you're getting with this is, excuse me, we've got a noisy truck driving by, but essentially what you're getting with this is a 5/5 body that is exiling a card at random from an opponent's hand. That's like a little mini Hymn to Torok. That's already like a pretty nasty ability, and they're not going to like to have a card picked at random out of their hand and put into exile. It's also exiling a card at random from their graveyard. If they only have 1 or 2 cards in their graveyard, this could be a really cool way to set that up, where you're like, oh, you played this Cultivate that I would like to cast myself, and that's the only card in your graveyard in this early part of the game. You can do that as well. So you're exiling a card at random from their hand, you're a card at random from their graveyard, and a card at random from the top of their library. This is probably the least useful part of this ability, but there are cute things you can do where if they scry something to the top, you can take note of that and play this on your turn. Or obviously the best case scenario is if they use a Vampiric Tutor or something like that, then it can get really nasty. But yeah, you're taking a card out of an opponent's hand, and this is letting you cast one of those 3 cards for free, which is not only card advantage because you're getting a card that you can play, but it's mana advantage too because you're casting it for free. So you're getting a 5/5 body for pretty good rate if you emerge it from an artifact. You're taking a card at random from an opponent's hand, and you get basically the choice of 3 random cards to pick from and cast one of them for free. So odds are you're going to hit something out of those 3 cards that it's at least somewhat useful to you, and you get to cast it for free. This card is awesome. I have not seen anybody else play it besides myself, but I would argue that if you're in black and if you have a decent amount of mana rocks in your deck, you should just be running this card. It's so much value on a little body, a decent sized body, honestly. And yeah, opponent goes down a card, you go up a card, and you end up with this 5/5 crab demon. It's awesome. So consider running this if you haven't already. Look at how many mana rocks you've got in your deck. Even worst case scenario, if you cast this for 6 mana, I would say that you are getting 6 mana worth of value out of this card. Okay, that is the end of my tangent, peeling away from Duskmourn, but to tie it back, Crabomination, one great reason why you could run Demonic Council. If you've got the Crabomination in your deck, at the very least, this goes and finds you your Crabomination. And at the very best, if you have Delirium, it's a Demonic Tutor, which is just a fantastic card. Okay, moving on, let's go take a look at, here he is, Valgavoth, Terror Eater. This card is just so cool. I couldn't resist talking about it. I'm sure you've heard a million people talk about it at this point. And honestly, like a decent amount of people kind of poo-pooing it, which I think is understandable when comparing it to other potential reanimation targets like Atraxa, but I do think that that is a mistake because this card is a house. It is 6 mana and 3 black, so 9 total mana for a legendary Elder Demon with flying and lifelink. It's a 9/9 flying lifelink. and this has ward sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. That's for all intents and purposes hexproof. If somebody actually pays this ward cost, great. They just went down so many cards they had on the table in order to actually, and plus a card in their hand to remove this. That's fine with me. I'll take that. Essentially hexproof. If you want to get rid of this, you have to wipe the board, which is pretty common in Commander, to be fair, but still, targeted removal isn't going to work on this thing. Okay, what else does it do? If a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Sweet. Grave hate just built in. But the neat part about that is that during your turn, you may play cards exiled with Valgavoth, and then if you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. So that is just a huge ability. Anything that goes to your opponent's graveyards from anywhere gets exiled with Valgavoth, and then on your turn, you can play them by paying life instead of mana, which is just broken if it lives long enough, which again, the ward ability is going to help it to live long enough. You're just going to get so much value off of this, and the 9 lifelink flying damage that it's going to be coming through for is going to give you all that life that you need in order to spend to play these cards. So it fuels itself, it protects itself, it's freaking enormous. It is just huge, and it is just a really cool card. I am so tempted to just build a black ramp commander deck that's just got this guy in the command zone that just tries to land him as soon as possible. I kind of already have a lot of decks like that. I'm a sucker for a big bomb in the command zone. I know a lot of people like to have something that they're able to cast reliably in the command zone, but this is just so exciting to get to. I might try and do it. Awesome card. Great reanimation target for other formats. I've heard people talk about it in Legacy. I know kind of the go-to right now, if I'm not mistaken, is Archon of Cruelty, which does have immediate value when it comes down onto either Archon, I should say, or Atraxa, obviously. Both of those cards have immediate value right when they come down onto the table, but what they don't have is any protection for themselves, whereas this has just got the again, pseudo hexproof. Your opponent's going to need a edict effect to remove it or a board wipe effect to remove it, and ideally you've got another creature to sacrifice to an edict. It's just going to be very game ending if in Legacy again you can Entomb reanimate this. It's just disgusting. But again, for Commander, really cool card. I like it in the command zone, and I just like it as a big bomb that you can include in the 99 as well. Not much more to say about it beyond that. So let's keep pushing into... Okay, guys. Unholy Annex Ritual Chamber. I cannot believe how relatively little I have heard people talking about this card. This card might be the best Commander card in the entire set, just objectively. It is a room. The first side of this room is Unholy Annex. 3 mana, 2 and a black for a enchantment room that says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Otherwise, you lose 2 life. The other side of this is Ritual Chamber, which is 5 mana, 3 and 2 black. When you unlock this door, create a 6/6 black demon creature token with flying. Okay, I am just like so enamored with this card. I'll preface this by saying this first part, Unholy Annex, is almost a strictly better Phyrexian Arena. Now, Phyrexian Arena is, I think, kind of slowly starting to fall out of favor in Commander, but a lot of people still play that card, and it's a pretty solid piece of card draw in black that just is going to give you value over the course of the game. One reason why I personally don't love Phyrexian Arena is because it doesn't do anything the turn it comes down. It takes a while to get going. It's kind of slow. This card draws you a card on your end step, meaning that the turn that you play it, it's going to start drawing cards for you. That is so much better than Phyrexian Arena. It means that essentially any amount of cards that you draw off of your arena, this is going to give you one more for the same amount of mana, and less colored black pips as well, so it's easier to cast if you're splashing it in other colors. Yes, you are losing 2 life each time instead of 1 life, but if you get a demon on the field, all of a sudden this is also a drain effect for your opponents, meaning that they're losing 2 life and you're gaining 2 life. Like, that is just in and of itself, I think it's a staple of black card draw until it gets power crept by whatever else comes after it. But as of right now, this is one of the strongest options for black card draw in the entire format. I cannot believe that more people are not on top of this card, because again, Phyrexian Arena that draws you a card the turn it comes down, that's crazy. But we're not even done. Look at this other side. This is 5 mana Ritual Chamber for a 6/6 flying demon. That's 5 mana for a 6/6 flying demon. That's already like pretty far above rate. A 5 mana 6/6 flying is already, just in its own right, kind of good. It's not great, but it's kind of good. And then if you factor in that it's attached to a strictly better Phyrexian Arena, and when you create this demon, then all of a sudden, instead of paying 2 life per card draw, you're gaining 2 life per card draw and draining your opponents. Like, you can tell I'm excited about this one. This card is wild. I've heard people talking about it, but not nearly as much as they should be. This is here to stay in the Commander format. One of, if not the strongest Commander cards in the entire set. I recommend you pick some up. I've already got some pre-ordered. Just bonkers. Just a crazy card. That's basically all I have to say about it. But again, if you're looking for black card draw, you're not going to do better than this in most scenarios. I mean, obviously, if you need immediate card draw, there's other options to look at. But if you just want incremental card draw, you're not going to do better than this. Okay. Moving on. We have Peer Past the Veil. This is a really cool and kind of unique card for these colors. This is 2 and a red and a green for an instant, 4 total, that says discard your hand and then draw X cards, where X is the number of card types among cards in your graveyard. So first of all, this is an instant, which is awesome. You can just hold up interaction, and then if you don't end up needing to interact, you can just cast this at the end step before your turn. How many permanent types do you need in your graveyard in order for this card to be good? I would argue not. You don't even need full Delirium, I don't think, for this card to be good. I think if you have 3 different card types, which is super easy to do, then you are discarding your hand and drawing 3 at instant speed for 4 mana. That's already just pretty good, especially considering you're in a Gruul deck. You're not going to be doing a whole lot of card drawing. I mean, I know green is decent at drawing cards, but again, if you have 3 or fewer cards in your hand, I think that, and then 3 permanent types in your graveyard, I think this is already just a pretty solid card. It's putting stuff into your graveyard so it fuels itself. I mean, obviously in Commander you're only running 1 copy of it, but if you're already doing graveyard stuff, it helps you with that. But also it's draw 3 cards for, again, this is looking at sort of, I would say, a middle ground of like where this is going to actually play out in terms of how many cards you have in your graveyard. But again, I don't think it's hard to have 3 permanent types in your graveyard. I think if you have less than 3, it's not very good. But if you have at least 3, it's solid. And if you have more than 3, like, then this is like starting to become really good. If you have Delirium, if you have 4 permanent types in your grave, or sorry, not permanent types, it's 4 card types in your graveyard, then this is 4 mana, draw 4 at instant speed. That's crazy. And you can have more than that too. It doesn't just stop at Delirium. You can have 5 card types. Like, again, that's going to start to get harder and harder to accomplish, but still not that hard. But if you have Delirium, this card is amazing. Draw 4 for 4 mana at instant speed. Yes, you have to discard your hand, but you're not playing this until you are low on cards in your hand to begin with. And that's going to be later in the game anyways, so your graveyard's going to be bigger and more stocked, so this is just going to get you more and more value. Awesome card. I have heard some people talk about it, but I think it's playable in Commander, and not just playable. I think it's like very solid, especially if you are in these colors and doing graveyard stuff. That's about all I have to say about this one. Now that we got through our streak of edgy black cards and I got to talk about Abomination, let's go back over to let's see, where are you? Here we go. Volgavoth's Onslaught. This one is really cool too. It is XX and a green mana for a sorcery, and it says pretty simple: manifest dread X times and then put X/1/1 counters on each of those creatures. The first time I saw this, I was kind of just like, meh, it's okay. I will say that I think just in general, manifest dread is a lot better than a lot of people are initially sort of clocking it at. But the more that I looked at this, the more I was like, hold on a second. So you're telling me the worst case scenario with this card is you play it for 3 mana, that it's not very good. You are paying 1 for X twice and then a green mana for 3 total, and you get to manifest dread once and put 1/1/1 counter on that creature. And for those of you unfamiliar with manifest dread, it's essentially just manifest, but instead you look at the top 2 cards of your library. You pick one of them to put onto the field face down as a 2/2 creature, and then the other one goes into your graveyard. And then if the face down card is a creature, at any time you can pay the creature's mana cost to flip it face up into whatever creature it is. So one reason why I think that Manifest Dread is better than a lot of people are giving it credit for is it's letting you look at the top 2 cards, which is already just like pretty good. You're getting a lot more sort of information and a lot more choice in what ends up happening with this. And that choice is going to be, you get to ideally find a creature out of the top 2 cards that you can manifest face down, and then another card that you're like, okay, I'm looking for an enchantment for Delirium in my graveyard, so I'm going to pitch this to my graveyard. Or it could be I'm playing some kind of reanimator thing, so I want to actually just put this big creature into my graveyard to reanimate. There's just a lot of like setting up graveyards that Manifest Dread can do, in addition to just getting you that 2/2 creature. So yeah, I think, and again, you're getting that choice of looking at the top 2 cards each time. So I think in general, Manifest Dread is just kind of like people aren't fully grasping how strong that ability can be. But then this card as well. So again, we went over the example of playing it for 3 mana, where you're getting 1 Manifest Dread with a 1/1 counter on it. So it's going to end up being a 3/3 creature. Put 1 card into your graveyard and that 3/3 creature onto the field. Not great. But let's look at if X is 2. If X is 2, you're paying 5 mana for this card because 2/2 and a green. And then you're manifesting Dread twice and putting 2 counters on each of those creatures. So if you pay 5 mana for this, you're getting 2 4/4s for 5 mana onto the battlefield. And not just that, but you're also looking at the top 4 cards of your library, picking the best 2 of those 4 to put into your graveyard for whatever reasons you might need, and then manifesting the best 2 as creatures onto the field as 4/4s. And another thing to note is if you do pick a creature that eventually you're going to want to flip face up from this card, it'll keep the counters when you flip it face up. So if you, if you put I was going to use Grizzly Bear as an example, but that's already a 2/2, so that's another great example. If you put a Hill Giant down as a 2/2 creature, and then you pay the 4 mana to flip it face up as a 3/3, it's still going to have those 2 1/1 counters on it, so it'll actually be a 5/5. So if you play this for 5 mana, you're getting 2 4/4s onto the battlefield, which I think is just solid. But again, it's helping to stock your graveyard. It's helping you to do some selection with the Manifesting Dread. If you get to 7 mana for this, which is not unrealistic, people pay 7 mana for spells in Commander. But yeah, if you pay 7 for this, you are getting... Okay, so you're manifesting Dread 3 times, and then you're putting 3 counters on each of those things. So you're getting 3 5/5 creatures. You're getting 15 power for 7 mana across 3 creatures. And you're looking 6 cards deep into your deck and picking the best 3 of those 6 to put into your graveyard. In a graveyard deck, I think this card is just a slam dunk. I think that it is just going to do so much work for you in terms of putting board presence, giving you board presence, and then also helping to select 4 cards that you want to put into your graveyard. But I would almost argue that even outside of a graveyard deck, this is just putting so much power onto the table so efficiently that if you're just in a stompy deck, there's an argument that this is a viable card to run. Again, 2 4/4s for 5, 3 5/5s for 7. What is it? 4 6/6s for 9. I mean, obviously, once you're getting up to 9, you're just doing ridiculous stuff. But yeah, this card is awesome. Manifest Dread, I think, in general, is more powerful than it looks. Cannot wait to play with it. And I do think that, obviously, in a graveyard deck, this card is awesome. I don't even think it necessarily has to be in a graveyard deck. If you're just trying to put a lot of power onto the table, check this card out. Okay, what else have we got on our list? I think we're getting close to the end here. We've got 2 more cards, so let's take a look at Roaring Furnace. You might notice I like rooms. I think that rooms also are more powerful than they may appear to a lot of people, because it's 2 spells. It's 2 cards in 1 card. It's inherently a 2-for-1. You're using 1 card to get essentially 2 cards worth of value, which just is great in and of itself. This card is really cool because you can pay 2 mana for Roaring Furnace, which is when you unlock this door, this room deals damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to target creature an opponent controls. So this is effectively a 2 mana kill spell. It's most of the time it's going to kill whatever you want, especially in the early game when you have a full grip. Also, you'll notice that this is a blue card, so you're running it in a Izzet deck, so you're going to always have, if you're playing Izzet correctly, you're always going to have plenty of cards in your hand. So yeah, 2 mana, it's sorcery speed, so, you know, there's a little give and take there. It's not the best, but 2 mana kill spell, even at sorcery speed, is just fine. But also, later on, or if you want to do this first, it's also just 5 mana, you have no max hand size, draw an extra card at the beginning of your end step. Like the black room that we were looking at, this is end step, so this is end step, so you get that card immediately the turn that you play it, which is so much better than at the beginning of your upkeep. I don't have a whole lot more to say about this. Just staple semi-efficient removal with semi-efficient card draw together on 1 card. Sign me up. I think this card is great. It's going to do work in Standard, I think. It's going to do work potentially in other formats. But yeah, I think it's a great Commander card as well. Yeah, you have to pay a lot of mana to get that Steaming Sauna down, but if there's ever just a lull in the game where you can safely tap out to effectively not do a whole lot, but even still, you're still getting a card off of it that turn that you do this. So yeah, awesome card. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. So let's go ahead and move on to my last pick for my top 10 here. And it is Volgavoth's Lair. Once again, I probably won't have a whole lot to say about this card, but it is just kind of self-evidently awesome. This is a enchantment land. So just starting with the most important piece of it right there, it is an enchantment land. It has hexproof. It enters tapped, and then as it enters, you choose a color, and it taps for the color that you choose. We have seen how busted... if you've been playing Magic for a while, at least, you have seen how busted artifact lands can be. Historically, we've only ever gotten 1 other enchantment land, and that's Urza Saga, which is a ridiculously busted card for many other reasons aside from the fact that it's an enchantment land. But I do think that just being an enchantment land is a huge upside on a card, especially because this has hexproof. That is super key. You definitely don't want to eat a disenchant that actually stone rains you and blows up a land of yours. But since this has hexproof, it's going to be protected from any kind of enchantment removal, which is awesome. And yeah, it is a land that is an enchantment. There's so many things that you can do with that. If you're playing any kind of like Constellation, or in this set it's Eerie, or any kind of Enchantress strategy that cares about enchantments entering the battlefield under your control, this is a slam dunk. If you are doing anything with Delirium, where you want multiple card types in your graveyard, this is a slam dunk. Another thing I really like about this is if you are running... what is it? It's Enlightened Tutor, I believe. Enlightened Tutor can go find this. Obviously, that's not the greatest target, but I've definitely been in situations where it's like, gosh, I have this tutor in my hand, but I just need to draw a land, and I think that's a really cool use for it, especially because it can color fix you as well. Yeah, it enters tapped, so yes, obviously that's not ideal. I think it would be absolutely busted if it didn't enter tapped. So I think that's a good safety sort of valve there. But even still, I think this card is ridiculously playable. I think that the decks that want it are going to really want it. And I think there's a lot of decks that could really want a land that you can just run in your land slots that is also an enchantment. I could probably go and find a million other reasons why an enchantment land is playable, but I'll open that up to the comments below. Go ahead and leave a comment if you have any cute uses for this Vavo Layer card. I'm curious to hear what other people can come up with. I'm sure plenty of people are already talking about this card, but definitely wanted to include it on my list because I just think it's fantastic. But yeah, guys, that is the end of my top 10 Commander Duskmourn cards. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you hanging out with me today. And yeah, go ahead and leave a comment below if you have any thoughts about any of my picks, if you have any thoughts about creative uses for Vavo Layer, or if you disagree, or maybe what cards you are excited for from Duskmourn as well. I'd be curious to hear all of that. Give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I intend to continue doing this series as new sets come out, and also I have a bunch of deck techs on the channel, and I'm going to continue with those. And yeah, just thanks so much for being here. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Yeah, just have a good one and take care. I'll see you in the next one.